Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. As you could probably tell, I'm not in my normal studio. I'm in the process of setting up a new one, but for right now, I'll just use the green screen and hopefully that'll be good enough. Anyway, recently I gave a talk at All Things Open in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was a ton of fun. The talk that I gave was all about Linux adoption on the desktop, but more importantly, one thing that's, well, holding it back. The thing is, there's a lot of toxicity in the Linux community, and while not every community is toxic, there's a fair amount of infighting within the Linux community, and overall, I think it makes it less attractive to develop for. And that's what I talked about in my talk at All Things Open. So what I'm going to do right now is play that back for you guys who didn't get to see it in person. Enjoy. How's everybody doing? So happy to be here. This is my second All Things Open and second time on this stage, and it's just incredible to have a opportunity to be here at all, let alone speaking to all of you. Today we're going to talk about something that I think is a topic that people facepalm when they hear it. You know, year of the Linux desktop. Why hasn't Linux taken over? Now, this topic has been done to death, but I want to kind of look at a very specific aspect of it that I don't feel gets enough attention. Obviously, there's many reasons why Linux hasn't taken over the desktop, but what I'm going to do is make the case that in at least some part, the Linux community itself is the reason why Linux hasn't taken over the desktop. So, let's get started. First of all, who am I? My name is Jay LaCroix, and I have over 20 years of experience working with Linux. Also, over 20 years working in enterprise IT. I've written 6 books professionally published about Linux, so I think I know a few things about it, and I have a few opinions. And speaking of opinions, I have a YouTube channel. That's kind of like the in thing now, but my channel in particular, Learn Linux TV, surprised me because at one point, I didn't think I'd get over 200,000 subscribers. There's at one point, I'm like, who cares about Linux enough to float a YouTube channel about Linux? But here we are. And it now has over 750,000 subscribers. That's incredible. So over 45 million views later. Honestly, I haven't checked the views in like 6 months. I have no idea what they are now, but they're pretty massive. So this tells me something, that we have a platform that can't take over the desktop, but people obviously care about it. I mean, to get 750,000 subscribers and the many views I've had, people care about Linux. We call it a niche platform, but it really isn't. I also love this job. I mean, I get paid to talk about Linux all the time. What could be better than that? I get to learn things, and then I get to teach you guys things, and then I get to dissect things and find better ways of teaching things. And the greatest thing for me is empowering people's careers, because there's going to be all kinds of people out there that have learned something from me and my channel or my community, and they're taking that with them in their day-to-day job, and it's just so cool. Let's talk about where Linux is right now. Now, numbers are kind of hard, especially Linux adoption, because there's going to be variables and things I won't get into. But a recent search, I found that 90% of public cloud workloads use Linux. Pretty impressive. It has 70% market share when it comes to web servers, Internet of Things, and smartphones. Yes, all 3. That's pretty significant for something that people call a niche platform. It's not looking like a niche to me. 50% of embedded systems run Linux. And it's estimated that 40% of all computing devices run Linux. Pretty impressive. So if Linux can conquer so many different markets, then why hasn't it conquered the desktop? I mean, if it owns all these markets, then why is it struggling here? Now, obviously, there's going to be some common complaints that you'll hear. And these are valid complaints. I'm not going to come up here and tell you, oh, these are all wrong. No, these are all valid. The important thing to keep in mind, there's not just one reason why Linux hasn't taken over the desktop. Linux is a sum of all of its parts, and so too are its problems. And one common complaint for those of you that play games, a lot of people don't feel that there's enough AAA games available on Linux. And again, we're talking about the desktop here, so this is important to quite a few people. Big name software support is missing. There's people that, for whatever reason, they use Adobe or whatever software they use, their work might demand it, or whatever the case might be. Maybe they love Adobe software, it doesn't really matter, it's not available. Hardware support is sometimes limited, and the reason why I say sometimes limited is because, in my opinion, Linux has the best hardware support of any platform in existence. Now, I know that might sound wrong, but when you look at the issue, generally when people complain about hardware support, they're complaining about GPUs, they're complaining about Wi-Fi cards, to a lesser extent sometimes network cards. But if you really think about it, the majority of everything works. It's just the things we care about the most that sometimes don't. We need to check our email, but our Wi-Fi card doesn't work. We want to play a game, but we can't even get an NVIDIA card to install. So obviously there's some hardware problems. But when we look at everything, Linux works more often than it doesn't. I remember installing Windows many times, and I have to solve each exclamation mark in the device manager one by one by one by one. Go to the driver or the manufacturer's website, Dell, whatever, download the drivers. It's just what we had to do. But Linux, you generally only have to get your GPU working in Wi-Fi, but still, there's sometimes some issues with that. Now, this is a really big one, especially when we talk about enterprise IT. When you talk about CTOs, they enjoy having group policy, Active Directory, being able to have a setting that they could just blast to everything. I mean, no administrator wants to manage like a couple thousand Windows desktops by hand. Nobody has time for that. So the Windows platform has tools. Say what you want about Windows, but it has tools. There's things available that enterprise companies are able to use, they are using, and it gets their job done for them. Now, when we look at Linux, we have technologies like Ansible, we have Terraform, and a number of others I can get into. But we really don't have anything that can compete with these things, at least not on the level that enterprise admins use on the Windows side of things. So what are we waiting for? We have the technology to develop these things right now, so why aren't we? I mean, it's not like we're waiting for a new programming language to come out. I mean, we're developing things like Systemd and all these other things, and we're making progress. And computer manufacturers can easily adapt Linux to their hardware. They have the source code. It doesn't get any better than that. If they come out with a brand new computer, they have full access to everything. They don't have to call Microsoft and ask for something. They have everything they need right there, but they're not making them. Missing libraries and components, these things can be further developed, but I mentioned here, why is no one doing it? That's wrong. Many people are doing it. It's just, we don't really seem to be getting anywhere with these things. I mean, how many of you are using Wayland as your display manager? A lot more than I thought, but still a very, very small portion of the room. It's a paradox to me. Linux has conquered every market it exists in except the desktop. And like I mentioned, I guess I got ahead of myself here talking about Wayland, but I was just itching to make that point. So Linux being the most flexible platform, you would think, at least in my opinion, that desktop adoption would have happened by now. And there's some obvious reasons why, and we really have to address the elephant in the room first. People hate change. That's going to be obviously a big reason. I mean, if you tell someone, hey, I want to change your operating system and everything that you do and the entire way that you do everything and you have to relearn everything, doesn't that sound great? How many people are going to want to make that change as a change in workflow? So that's another example of a reason why the Linux desktop could have some problems. But what's the issue? Now, I say possible answer, the Linux community itself, and let me elaborate on this. Again, this is something that I've noticed, especially with the YouTube channel. And obviously, like I mentioned, there's multiple reasons why Linux isn't number one. But we can't blame the Linux community solely. I'm going to get into the actual reasons why I feel that way shortly, but I just wanted to put this out there that we can't put the blame on anything solely. We also can't generalize an entire community as being bad. There's going to be many people being good, and sometimes it's not about the people. But I do think the Linux community is a sizable factor in the lack of desktop adoption. First of all, everyone has an opinion whether you want it or not. Here, I just went on Facebook earlier today, and this individual decided that he wanted to create a cheat sheet of systemd commands. And this is a very helpful thing to do. It's cut off here, you can't really see the whole thing, but the image was, just this really well-done cheat sheet. So if people want to learn some systemd commands, maybe they might download this and use it. And this person just made this for people, that's great. But just to get comments like, anti-systemd comments, that's just going to discourage people. And that's a very minor example. I mean, people can have opinions and that's totally fine, but there's more. Sorry to interrupt my own video, but I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I love creating Linux-related content for you guys. But unfortunately, producing high-quality Linux content like this isn't cheap. But if you want to help me make even more content for you guys, then consider supporting Learn Linux TV. And a great way to do that is to check out the official shop for Learn Linux TV, which was just recently updated. Inside the shop, you'll find distro-themed shirts, bags, drinkware, and more. And there's some other surprises there as well. For example, I've just introduced a mousepad that doubles as a Tmux cheat sheet. How cool is that? So check out the shop at merch.learnlinux.tv, or you could check out the merch shelf right here on YouTube. You could get yourself something really cool and support Linux learning at the same time, so it's a win-win. Anyway, thank you guys so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the video. But even if you don't develop code, sometimes toxicity within the Linux community can discourage users to give it a shot. But I want to elaborate more on the earlier point about the toxicity, the things that people run into. I want to run Ubuntu, and then someone tells me, you're stupid for using Ubuntu. Somebody wants to develop for systemd just to hear systemd sucks. That's not going to encourage anyone. It gets even worse, though, because I have some more egregious examples. But I do feel that this infighting and the toxicity in the Linux community, especially when we have situations where people are, have good intent, they just get shot down. It's just not right. Forum posts can often result in an RTFM response. Now, I'm going to say this. I hate RTFM responses, and they have no place. Now, I get it. When when people are constantly asking the same questions over and over again, could they have done a Google search? Sure. They probably could have, but they didn't. But they decided to come to a forum and discuss Linux, and most of the time when people choose to do this, they are told, read the manual, don't, do your own research and all these things. My opinion is this: if you decide to go to a community and donate your time to answer questions, either do it or don't. When you give an RTFM response, even if you're right, and they probably should have read the manual, let's be honest, I do understand it's a legit problem, but all people have done is just discourage them and just make them feel bad for asking a question. If someone doesn't want to answer the question, I think just saying nothing is better than an RTFM response. If you think that they could have done their own research, just ignore them. Now, it gets even worse. This is a forum post that I pulled from a toxic community where someone is actually being called an F-wit for being a part of this conversation. And this is just one example. I'm not going to disparage the community that this came from, but this is just one of the examples that we see. It's pretty bad when someone goes to a forum and then they're called something like this. So obviously it's okay to have an opinion that you don't like systemd. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But sometimes it just goes too far. And this person is apparently proud of their Ubuntu install, just to be told to switch to Endeavor OS. Oh, gee, thanks. But it gets worse. In the Linux community, we've had death threats. Now, granted, this right here, you'll see the date is from 2008. So this was quite some time ago. But I can tell you, having female developer friends, it is not better. Especially for women in tech, it is hard. It is very, very hard. I mean, just winning, being born a certain gender, you have to prove yourself even harder, and getting death threats. And there's been death threats about the systemd thing with Debian, I believe. There's just a number of others. So imagine wanting to contribute to systemd, only to be told that systemd sucks. Not really going to encourage anyone, is it? Wanting to contribute to Ubuntu, only to be told that it's a bad distro. Wanting to develop for Linux in general, but being discouraged by all the infighting. You know, the only community that I think has more infighting is the Star Wars community. I think that's the only one that even comes close. Imagine having to work harder to prove yourself as a developer just because you're a female. Yes, I only mentioned that, but that does bear repeating. It's huge. And if you think the problem's not big, you're not paying attention. So what do we do about it? Now, I have a Linux YouTube channel where I teach people all kinds of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have the answers. What I want to do is just really ask the question, is Linux desktop adoption being slow? Is there a parallel to the Linux community and how developers are treating each other, how users are being treated by community leaders, communities with no code of conduct, you know, being called an F-wit just because you ask questions? That's just one example. There's no easy answer, but I think shining the light on this and just asking the question is important, because obviously it's not the only reason, but I feel that people just probably don't want to develop for something that's just got all that drama. So how do we tackle this? Everyone that contributes to Linux or a Linux-related technology should be made to feel comfortable doing so. Okay, a lot of these people, and we just heard about this, they don't make much money, okay? They don't really have much incentive to do this. There's companies that employ people to develop this software, but a large number of these people are just, you know, working a day job and they're doing this for fun, or they're doing this as a hobby or something like that. It's not always easy to deal with that. We need to make people feel comfortable. We need to meet people where they are. And sure, there's going to be that beginner that just tried Linux yesterday for the first time and has all these annoying questions, but that Linux user I meant to say, but that Linux user could mature into a developer that's solving problems. Instead, they're probably just going to go to Windows. We need to encourage developers and users and appreciate their work. I've seen a lot of time, and sometimes users can be toxic too, because I'll see situations where, you know, someone has an expectation of their distribution. You need to solve this GPU problem right now because my games don't work. It's not just about you, right? But sometimes it's just a matter of how it's asked, or sometimes, can I help fix this problem? Would have been a lot better. And obviously answer questions in forums or don't, but at least don't be toxic towards people. So when I talk about this situation, what I want everyone to leave here with is just that question in their mind. I'm not asking anyone to agree with me. And it's okay if people think I'm wrong and I'm off my rocker for this, but I feel that we can't really expect Linux desktop adoption when it's almost like the Star Wars community in terms of toxicity. And if you don't believe me, just tell the Star Wars community that you enjoyed episode 2, you will regret it. I promise you, you will regret it. Now, of course, I jest about that, but what I want everyone to leave here with, just keeping that in mind, as you navigate Linux communities, as you navigate forums, when you see these kinds of things, is it part of the problem? Call it out. Report it, flag it, whatever you have to do, but especially when it comes to community leaders, I'm calling on community leaders to take extra steps to identify this and just try to make it better. The thing is, I want to see Linux not necessarily take over. I don't want Linux to be the #1 choice on desktop, believe it or not. I want it to be the situation where someone wants to buy a computer. They could buy a Mac, they could buy a Windows machine, they could buy a Linux machine. I want them to go to the store and see all three, and I want that decision to be hard. I want them to have to stand there for a while because the technology is that good, that they really have a hard time deciding which one to go with because it's just that great, okay? I think it's great that we have 3 major platforms. If you don't like Linux, you have Mac. If you don't like Mac, you have Windows. But I want it to be an equal player. And what I'm going to do is always encourage kindness in communities, but I think without really paying attention to how developers are treated. We already heard about the fact they don't get paid a lot. You know, that's absolutely true. Everybody wants something for free. But I'm just asking everyone to keep this, just ask yourself this question. And I think the answer that you're going to come to is that Linux adoption, at least in part, toxicity in the community can really curb adoption. It's really hard to get on board with something that, You know, it doesn't really seem all that attractive from a kindness perspective. So that's what I'll leave you with. And there you go. Any questions? Comments? Oh, yeah, that would be great. LearnLinux.tv. Everything that I do is on that site. You'll find all of my videos, all 1,000-something of my videos on there. Yes, I have that many. All the books that I do are linked there. The community is linked there. Basically, if you go to that page, you'll know everything I'm up to. So LearnLinux.tv, if you're interested, definitely check out the YouTube channel. I'm really proud of it. And one thing that I hope everybody notices with the YouTube channel when they watch my videos is that they look better than the majority. And no, I'm not saying I'm better than anyone, but one thing I think is important with Linux is that we put our heart. If we're going to develop something, develop it well. And the thing is, we are the marketing for Linux. You haven't seen a Linux commercial on TV, so we need to put our best, vision forward. And my hope is you'll see that the content is premium Linux content, and that's what I think we need. And that's what I encourage everyone to do that is a content creator. Come join me, make some Linux content. But in the meantime, learnlinux.tv. Come check it out. Thank you. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed my presentation at All Things Open. I definitely had a lot of fun. Also, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because there's a lot of great content coming, if I do say so myself, that I can't wait for you to see. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.